Okay, so welcome back to the class once again. My name is Coach Dami. I'm the lead chess instructor at Gen Chess Educational Services. In our last class, one of the things I taught you guys was on understanding the chessboard. I said the chessboard consists of 64 squares, and there are three ways to describe the chessboard. We have the the first one is called a file, whereby we said our files are a group of squares that are lined up vertically on the chessboard. I also talked about rank. The ranks are a group of squares that are lined up horizontally on the chessboard. For example, in the case of the file, we use letters to describe a file, where we have the A file, the B file, the C file, and so on and so forth. Then, in the case of the rank, we use number position to describe a rank, where we have the first rank, the second rank, the third rank, the fourth rank, the fifth rank, and so forth. Then we before we talked about diagonals, we also talked about the squares. That the squares have um two things similar thing in common, that their color of their squares is similar, and they are arranged and they are lined up in such a way that one corner of the square touches the other corner of the square, not the edges and not the side, but just simply um, the corner, which takes us to the last one, which was the diagonals, where I said the diagonals are a group of squares that are lined up diagonally on the chessboard, and they also have names. For example, to know the name of a diagonal, you first of all have to spot out the name of the square where the diagonal started from. If you start from A4, we know that it's an end in H8. We simply say this name of this diagonal is A4 H8 diagonal, and so forth. So today we are going to look at the rook. The rook is that piece that looks like a castle. And how does the rook move? The rook moves on a straight line. It moves vertically. It can move vertically along the file, up and down. It can also move horizontally along the rank, left side, and also the right side, just like this. So just like, for example, when I'm teaching my kids, I usually tell them that the rook moves like a police officer moving along the road. So it can move up. This one can also move sideways. Oh, okay, this can also move sideways. It can also move down. It can move left, and it can also move right. And that is how the rook move. Now, the same way the rook move, that's the same way it also captures. For example, a rook can only capture a piece in front of it, just like this one, like this, and this is how the rook captures. So he captured the piece standing on its way, vertically or horizontally. If you also want to use this black rook to capture, we still do this, and so that is it. That is how the rook moves. The next one we are going to look at is the bishop. The bishop moves differently from different. The way the bishop moves is different from the way the rook moves. For example, the rook moves along files and also along ranks. And in the case of the bishop moves diagonally. Okay, now when you look at the bishop, one of the bishops sits on a light square, just like this. Another one sits on a dark square. So they don't move, they don't change color, they don't move from one color of square to the other. And they move diagonally. For example, this can move diagonally following this color of square and stop here. This can also move diagonally. This other bishop can also move diagonally and stop here. And this one can also move diagonally. So when they are moving, they make sure they follow the same color of square. When they move, they follow the same color of square. And that is how the bishop the bishop move. Now, the same way it moves, that's the same way it can capture. For example, this bishop can move diagonally and capture this. This can also move diagonally and capture this. So the same way they move, that is the same way they are going to do what? They are going to capture. So I think you've learned one or two things about the rook and the bishop. The next one we are going to look at is the queen. For example, the queen can move like the rook, and the queen can also move like the bishop. So that means the queen has the power of both the rook and the bishop. Now we know that the rook can move up on a straight line, down on a straight line, left and right. So does the queen. The queen also moves that way. And we know the bishop moves diagonally, just like this, like this, like this, and like this. So does the queen. The queen can also move like that. So that means the queen can move up, can move like this, can also move down like the rook, can also move back like the rook. It can also move diagonally. This can also move diagonally. So that is how the queen move. And if there is any piece along the path, the queen can just go ahead and capture that piece. Okay, alright, so the next one we're going to look at is the king. Now the king moves. The king can move anywhere on the board. I repeat, the king can move anywhere on the board, but just only one square. So the king can move up, it can move left, it can move right, it can also move diagonally, but it is only limited to just only one square. For example, the king can move like this. This king can move like this. This king can also move like this. So it practically moves everywhere on the board. So when you're trying to play chess, know that the king can move up, it can move down, it can move left, it can move right, it can also move diagonally, but just only one square. And if there is any piece along the path, the king can move along this path and capture the piece. So the next one we are going to look at is the knight. Okay, so now in the case of the knight moves in a very special way, in such a way that it moves like an L shape. So when the knight wants to move, it moves from a light square to a dark square in form of an L shape. And I'm going to show you how it does that. For example, if the knight is in this place and it wants to move to a square, what we do, especially how I used to teach kids, is you try to move 0, 1, 2, and turn. Either you turn left or you turn right. And that is how the knight moves. The knight can also move down like this, moving 0, 1, 2, and turn. Alright, or it turns this way. It can also move sideways by moving 1, 2, and either you turn up or you turn down. Or it moves 1, 2, either it turns up or it turns down. And that is how the knight moves. And I'm going to show you that. Now once you know the pattern, it will be easier for you to move the knight like this, and this moves like this. Notice that the knight always moves from a light square to a dark square. So this one is on a light square. If I want to move it 1, 2, and turn, notice I landed on a dark square, right? This is on a dark square. If I want to move it 0, 1, 2, and turn, you notice I landed on a light square, isn't it? So the knight moves. If it is on a dark square, it moves to a light square, and if it's on a light square, it moves to a dark square. And that is how the knight moves. Now the knight is really pieces that can jump over other pieces on the board. For example, if I want to use this knight to capture this, I'll simply do 0, 1, 2, and capture. And that is how the knight moves. The knight can capture any piece in front of. The knight can jump over any pieces in front of it. Now I'm going to do the same to the black one. 1, 2, and capture. So we know the knight can also move like this. 1, 2, and capture. And this can also move like this. 1, 2, and capture. And that is how we do it. So over time, it will be easier for you to do what? Capture your opponent's pieces with the knight. So far as you know the pattern, you may not really need to even count 1, 2, and turn. So far as you know the L-shaped pattern, it will be easier for you to capture the pieces on the board. Notice that knight alternate colors. From dark square, it moves and captures a light square, and from light square, it moves and captures a dark square, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. Now the last one I'm going to be teaching you guys is on how to move the pawns. Alright, so these are the pawns. They are the smallest pieces on the board, and the way they move is they move only 1 square forward on a straight line. This can also move like this on a straight line. But when they're still on their starting position, for example, the white that is still on the second rank, we can decide to move it 2 squares forward. This one move 2 squares forward. I'm going to show you 1 square and 1 square. 1 square. Or if it is on the starting position, you can move 2 squares forward. If this is on the starting position, you can also move 2 squares forward. Alright, so either it moves 1 square or 2 squares. Now, one thing about the pawns is the pawn cannot move. The pawn cannot move sideways. This is wrong. The pawn don't move like this. The pawn also don't move diagonally. I can never see the pawn. Let me do it again. The pawn can't move like this. It can't move sideways. It can't move back. I can never see the pawn moving diagonally. So all this way, the pawn does not move that way. Now, when the pawn wants to capture, let me do this. When the pawn wants to capture, the pawn does not capture a piece in front of it. How does it capture? The pawn captures 1 square diagonally like this, and if there is any piece along this path, it can move like this and capture. So the pawn moves 1 square straight forward and 1 square diagonally. Let me show you. And that is how the pawn captures. If this comes like this, it can play like this. It can move like this. If it doesn't want to capture, it can also come like this. If it comes like this, and so on and so forth. And that is how the pawn captures. Now, one thing about the pawn is the pawn cannot capture a piece in front of it. Is wrong. The pawn cannot capture sideways. And one more last thing, the pawn cannot capture diagonally. Is also wrong. The pawn can capture diagonally. Now, one thing about the pawn is there is a word called the pass pawn. Now, in the situation of this pass pawn, the pass pawn is a pawn that does not have any other pawns opposing it. For example, this white pawn is coming up, down here, and this black one is coming down in this place. Now, when you look at this pawn going up, there is no any black pawn that can oppose its movement. But when you look at this that is coming over to this place, we still have this one that's going to block him from coming to this side, and we still have another one that if it gets to this place is going to capture it. Now, because we have something like this, because this pawn does not have any piece of any pawn opposing it, we call this a pass pawn. Now, if this pawn gets to the, let's say for example, in the course of the movement, if the pawn gets to the end of the board, if the pawn gets to the end of the board and this comes up, if the pawn gets to the end of the board, you can decide to promote it to whatever piece you want to promote it to. Either you promote it to the queen, you promote it to the knight, you promote it to the rook, or you promote it to the bishop. But most of the time, we prefer to promote it to the queen because it's the strongest piece on the board. So I believe right now you've learned how to move all the pieces on the board. Alright, so now from what I taught you guys, for you to really do practice on it, either you register an account on lightchess.org or you register an account on chess.com. But most of the time I like to use Lightchess to do most of my practice because it's somehow free. Now one of the things you're going to do as a task is you go to the lightchess.org, you log in, you sign up, create an account. Once you've done that, for you to practice most of the things I taught you in this YouTube video, you click on learn. Where you see learn, you click on learn. Then once you over your mouse to the learn button, it will give you some options on the board. You will see chess basics, you see practice, coordinate, study, and coaches and classes. But in this aspect, you're going to click on chess basics. Once you click on chess basics, it will take you to this spot. But because you're just new to the game of chess, one of the things I want you guys to do is to practice on all these ones, whereby since you've learned how to move the rook, just for you to have that consistency, you try by practicing your knowledge of the movement of these pieces. Now the major idea is for you to what? For you to gain 3 stars in every thing. Now for you to gain 3 stars, you have to learn how to count the squares. For example, now if I want to get these 3 stars, if I start here first, this 1 move, 2 move, to get this star to be very difficult. I have to move another 1 move, which is what, 3, before coming to this place to capture. And if I do that, I'm only getting only 2 squares, but I don't want to have only 2 squares. I want to have the whole 3 squares. So before even making a move, the first thing I'll have to do is to first of all count before moving. So in my head, I'm counting this. If I move like this, I capture this first, then I now go like this, that is 2, then like this, 3. This is really for me to get the 3 stars. I'll do the same thing and capture it. Then I know in this other case it's also the same thing. There are 5 stars on the board and I have to move my rook. I need 5 rooks from the rook to capture the 5 stars. So I'll also do the same thing. I'll first of all start by counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So once I notice that movement is going to lead me capturing the 5 stars using 5 moves, I'll go ahead and start. So that is one of the things I want you guys to also do. So you do the same thing with the bishop, practicing with the bishop until you do the same thing with the queen, do the same thing with the king, do the same thing with the knight, and finally the pawn. Now the reason why I want you guys to get those 3 stars is that once you're able to do it, it will not become more natural to you. Movement of all the pieces will no longer look somehow strange or foreign. It will be something you can easily do on your own. But for you to get used to it, you need to make sure you get those 3 stars. Alright, so I'll see you guys in our next lesson. Bye.